It appears Fox gave its recent barbershop interview with former President Trump a bit of a trim, leaving some of his tangents, exaggerations, and false claims on the cutting room floor.
Now, we should point out, editing interviews is not unusual, especially when you're dealing with time constraints. Brevity is, of course, important, but the most important element is that the meaning of what's being said has to remain the same so that you don't misrepresent, whether intentionally or not, what your subject is saying. We have to point out the irony here. The former president recently accused CBS of editing a 60 Minutes interview with Vice President Kamala Harris, allegedly to make her look good. CNN chief media analyst Brian Stelter joins us now. And Brian, you've reviewed the full Fox video. What did you find comparing it to what aired?
That's right. Listening to you, I'm reminded of the old expression that everybody needs a good editor. I know I certainly do. But so does Donald Trump. And that's why this story is curious. It's because Trump has been attacking 60 Minutes for its editing decisions, accusing the network of conspiring with Kamala Harris to make her look better by editing her answers in a recent interview. CBS denies that, and last night, CBS sent a letter to Trump basically swatting away his threats to sue the network. But that's the curious context for this story about Trump's recent appearance on Fox. He visited a barbershop in the Bronx, and when he was there, Fox camera crews tagged along. I was able to watch a fuller version of the experience, the interaction, via Instagram, because one of the attendees filmed it and put it on Instagram. And what I noticed were all of these moments where Trump was either lying or exaggerating or rambling or going off script, and Fox cut those out of the broadcast. Here's an example. Here's a clip that Fox actually did air. Notice how he seems to answer the question from the attendee right away.
So my question is, with all this extra revenue we're going to be bringing into the country, so do you believe at some point in time we could find a way, once the country's back on its feet and getting enough revenue and paid off our debt, do you think it's possible to find a way to eliminate federal taxes?
There is a way.
And how do you feel about it?
You know, in the old days, when we were a smart country, in the 1890s and all, this is when the country was relatively the richest it ever was.
Good question, interesting answer, but actually that attendee had to ask the question 4 times and get Trump to answer. And Fox stitched it together over the course of 7 minutes to create the illusion of one clear answer. Participants had to keep following up when Trump would meander and ramble. Now, this is an example of what some Trump critics call sane washing, the press sometimes cleaning up Trump's speech to make him sound more sane. I would call it an example instead of normalizing. You know, it's an example of normalizing Trump to fit him into a TV time slot. Sometimes when that happens, you end up cutting out a lot of his false claims and rambling.
Yeah, and something that was not edited was CNN's town hall with Harris last night. You're getting a look at some of the ratings. Right. What does it say?
That's right. That's the contrast here. The overnight ratings for the CNN town hall with Kamala Harris show a lot of interest in what she has to say. Here in the closing stretch of the presidential campaign, at least 3.2 million viewers tuned in last night to see Harris. That makes this the highest rated town hall of the general election season, beating out Donald Trump's recent town hall on Fox. What that tells me is a lot of voters still want to see Harris in the final days of the campaign.
Sticking with our 2024 lead, there are now only 12 days until Election Day. We have 4 new CNN poll of polls from 4 key battlegrounds. First up, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Harris and Trump only separated by 1 percentage point, 48-47 Harris. North Carolina also razor thin, 49-48 Trump. In Georgia, the former president holds a slight advantage, 50-48 Trump. And finally in Arizona, also close, 50-47 Trump. Former President Trump is on the campaign trail in the Sun Belt, where just moments from now he's going to hold a rally in Tempe, Arizona, before heading to Vegas in Nevada. Let's bring in the panel. So at this point, honestly, I don't even know how much I should even show polls, because, look, we know this. There are, 7 battlegrounds, and maybe 8 if you include North Carolina, and it's tight. It's super tight, and, I don't know who's going to win. And Harry Enten has said, it could be an electoral landslide one way or the other if somebody win 7 of them, one way or the other.
Look, I mean, there are certain things we know. The electorate continues to evolve. Wrote this week about the latest data from the census. Eligible voters, non-college whites, who are the core Trump constituency, are down about 2 points since 2020, which continues the long-term trend. They've been down about 2 to 3 points every election going back to the 70s, and the difference is made up by voters of color and college-educated whites, both increasing by a point. Interestingly, the decline in the share of the eligible voting electorate among non-college whites was greater than the national average in Michigan and Wisconsin, replaced almost entirely by college whites. and less than the national average in Pennsylvania. I think, you know, to me, I feel like this year is ending where it began. Harris is going to be a lot more competitive than Biden in the Sun Belt swing states, but it's still going to be hard to tip any one of them actually over the line, which means that to win, she has to win the three, in all likelihood.
Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania.
Three states that fell out of the blue wall in 2016 that Trump put back in. And in those states, the key for her, the place where she can grow, are those white-collar inner suburbs with college-educated voters, especially women. That's what she's going to need to offset what will probably be very strong performances for Trump in Trump country, and maybe some cracks benefiting Trump in the inner cities.
So that's interesting. So the race, dead heat. Take a look at this Wall Street Journal poll. What's your opinion of this? Is the favorability. Harris's unfavorable rating increased 4 points since August. That's not what you want to see if you're the Harris campaign. Obviously, one of the issues going on here is that the Trump campaign has gone in with lots of TV ads and defined her, which is their job, which is what campaigns do. But that's not good for her.
No, but I still think people are still getting to know her. 90 days on the campaign, she's delivering, her closing argument with a contrast between her and Trump. I think over 3 million people tuned into the town hall last night, which is an incredible viewership. It's showing that people are still wanting to know more about her. So, of course, her favorability was going to drop from where it was in August when we were all on a sugar high from her. I would not be too concerned about this if I were them. They still have 2 weeks to continue to make their closing argument to these undecided voters, or to get people off their couch to vote.
What do you worry about as a Republican? What concerns you? I know that I've heard the positive spin and positive narrative from Republicans, and people are familiar with it. What are you concerned about going into this?
I think the only thing you're concerned about is if you look at every poll, one of the first times in our lifetime probably that a Republican benefits from higher turnout. You look at the numbers, Harris consistently is doing better with likely voters. Trump is doing better with registered voters. And so, I'm going to flip this on its head a little bit. What's giving me some comfort as a Republican is you are seeing incredibly high turnout in early voting in a lot of these key states right now. And that's actually probably a good thing for Donald Trump. It means that the voters who are less likely to engage
the low propensity
voters, irregular voters, folks who, are basically determining, do I vote or do I stay on the couch? As of right now, they're voting. And if you look at the makeup of those who are voting early, including absentee voting in Pennsylvania, early voting in Georgia, a lot of them, especially on the Republican side, are trending to these lower propensity, less regular voters in the overall makeup of the percentage of turnout.
So, Ron, earlier this month you wrote that to blunt Trump's appeal, the Harris campaign needed to remind voters what they might fear from having him back in the White House. She took that advice last night at the town hall. There was a lot of, the Trump campaign would call it fear-mongering. The Harris campaign and her supporters would say a reality check on the threat that Donald Trump poses. But when you go negative, when a candidate goes negative, you also run the risk of alienating some voters.
Well, it's interesting. I think she has come up with an interesting bridge, right? I mean, there is a fierce debate in the Democratic Party about whether the way to close the race is by focusing on the risks that a second Trump term would pose, as opposed to emphasizing what you can deliver for the middle class. And there's obviously a demographic component of that, because the democracy, rights, values argument is mostly aimed at those college-educated suburban voters that I'm talking about that aren't as economically squeezed. And the other one is about reassuring basically working-class, non-white voters and maybe some working-class, non-college white women. I thought what she said last night and again today was a pretty elegant kind of bridging of this, when she said Donald Trump will have an enemies list and I will have a to-do list, which basically takes both of these messages and combines them. And I am guessing we're going to hear a lot of that argument between now and the finish line.